So, I would like to talk about a book that I recently finished. That book being my book, my current work in progress, which does not have a title yet. I've been putting that off as long as possible because I can't, for the life of me, come up with a nice original name for an epic fantasy novel. Look, it's probably going to be blank of blank or a blank of blank and blank because that's what all fantasy novels are. But I'll figure it out. Yeah. My novel is about a lot, really. I've written two novellas in the past, both when I was very, very young, a child, and they're what you'd expect, really, from I think I was 10 when I wrote the first one, and 12 with the second. Now I'm 20, and not to brag, I think I'm something of a better writer than a 10-year-old boy. Um, my interests have certainly changed. Uh, I decided to write a fantasy novel because that's what I appreciate when I sit down to read something, right? Obviously, my favorite author is J.R.R. Tolkien, and I'm a fan of the works of George R. R. Martin, Margaret Weiss, and Tracy Hickman, Mary Stewart, all authors who've greatly influenced my writing in one way or another. And now my novel is finished. I'm running it through the final edits, and I'm going to be doing something with it, probably looking for a publisher. But I wanted to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the story and share some of the themes I tried to incorporate into it. So, yeah, um, my novel takes place in a fictional world heavily inspired by real history, taken from the medieval and dark ages. This is a setting where magic is somewhat rare, although very powerful when used properly. Monsters are not all that common, the stuff primarily of legends, while the affairs of humans take center stage. We have in the north of the world the Scaldlings, following a naming convention which you might find familiar. If you've ever read Beowulf, this is something of a reference to the Shieldlings from that famous poem. I tried my best to to work with a sort of cultural shorthand, let's call it, where tried to use familiar names and phrases and languages from our own world to allude to a fictional medieval culture. That way, when you hear Norse sounding names, you have an idea of this somewhat Viking culture, and I don't have to spend too long with exposition explaining what is basically a Viking culture. We can instead focus more so on the characters. I'll fill you in on the differences and the major characteristics of these Scaldlings as the story goes on and how they differentiate themselves from real world Vikings, right? But going right into it, it doesn't entirely matter because I like a nice backdrop, but it's the characters I'm here for. Um, the Scaldling side of things is seen through the perspective of a young woman named Alva who has one eye and who isn't much of a fighter. She certainly isn't a shield maiden. She's actually quite sneaky and soft spoken. She is the daughter of the warlord Askvarger, the Ash Wolf, who is a sorcerer and a jarl, seeking to unite Skaldland against the Wodlings in the south. But his motives are strange and somewhat ambiguous, and his affection for his daughter is non existent. Alva struggles to gain his approval, and she fights tooth and claw for every scrap of respect. She is downtrodden in many ways and somewhat meek, and it's her struggle to come into her own, to deal with these complicated feelings regarding her father and her beloved brother, who seems to be able to do no wrong. She's a very fun character to write about, as she gets very into folk magic later on and deals with a lot of strange and colorful characters. Um, my idea with the Scaldlings is to emulate as best I can the madness and peculiarities of a Norse saga, with the added drama of Alva's depression and very human desires to be loved and respected. And hopefully I managed to pull it off. Uh, while in the South, we have another story. We have the story of Devon Thorne, who is the Prince of Wildren, and it follows him who is he is a sickly youth, no more than 15 years old, and his father, the king, has recently died. Devon is struggling to take the throne for his own, as he is not loved by the people as his father was, who was not a good man by any means, but he was tall and strong and stately, while Devon is scrawny and introspective and a student of the arts, right? And he likes music and poetry, and he's also a student of the ceremonial magician and stargazer, Lord Mannion. My goal with Devon is to create, hopefully, a somewhat sympathetic take on the stories of leaders like Octavian and Alfred the Great, although in Octavian's case, perhaps less evil doing. While also I incorporate some Shakespearean elements, such as Hamlet, Prince Hal, and even Prospero to a certain extent. I shift perspectives throughout the narrative quite a bit. Each chapter is told from a different point of view, while the two main characters get the most attention. We also get perspectives of the stargazer Lord Mannion, the Irish-inspired Princess Aoife of Woodland, and the perspective of a mercenary swordswoman known as Audra, who is the closest you'll come to an elf in my story, though I'd argue she's more akin to a changeling or a cambion. Um, I'd say if I had to pick a theme for my novel, it would probably be about family. It would be about loss and about the struggle to be loved and accepted by those around you. Yes, family in general, and perhaps more specifically about fatherhood, as Alva deals with her own daddy issues, and Devon struggles with not having a father. His dad was absent even when he was alive, and when he wasn't absent, he was abusive. But Devon does have father figures, right? And both main characters lean on their families and on their friendships quite heavily. And I'd say much like Granddaddy Tolkien, uh, am not really a fan of one for one allegory, right? I'm fairly happy with my family, and none of us have ever tried to mutilate each other, by the way. But writing what you know is boring. That's probably a rant for another day. But yeah, you'll find 100 familiar stories in my novel, inspirations all. But I've tried my best to avoid obvious similarities and instead gone for something subtle. I've taken what I know and I've researched as much as I can and I've tried to make something special out of it. I truly hope that it makes you think, and I hope that it leaves off on a good note. I intend for it to be a series, So, yeah, if you're interested, let me know. Uh, the story means a lot to me, and I'm just looking forward to getting it out there and seeing what people think of it. I'm still trying to improve it as best I can, and I guess I guess wish me luck. Yeah, bye.